It's funny, isn't it, how often you hear about these, like, huge champions, the best of the best, talking about how they failed, like, a ton. It
Yeah.
almost makes you think, like, is failing, is that some secret ingredient? Is it not actually the opposite of success, but, like, the fastest way to get there?
Hmm.
So that's what we're diving into today, right? Why do those at the top, those champions, why do they seem to embrace failure? And the more important question, how can we, like, no matter what we're doing or where we are in life, use that same perspective to help us, you know?
I think it is really counterintuitive for a lot of people because
Mhm.
we're conditioned to think of failure as this thing to avoid at all costs.
Mm.
But when you start to examine like the stories and the journeys of people who have achieved at a high level, there's this pattern that emerges.
For sure. Take Thomas Edison.
Right.
This guy gave us the light bulb, something we totally take for granted.
Right.
But the story usually skips over, like, how many times he straight up failed before he got it right. And we're talking thousands of failed attempts.
Hmm.
And these weren't just, like, little mistakes. They were huge setbacks.
Yeah.
And yet they were super important to his ultimate breakthrough.
It seems like they were a part of the process.
Totally.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this fail faster formula, to understand why adopting this champion's mindset toward failure can be a powerful tool for you, no matter where you are in your journey or what challenges you're going through.
And it's more than just saying like, oh, failure happens. It's about really changing how we think about these moments.
I'm with you.
So in this first segment, we're going to kind of break down this mindset that allows top performers to look at failure not as this like roadblock, but as a signpost.
Sure.
How do they view a setback differently than someone who feels totally defeated by it?
Well, I think a core difference is perspective,
Yeah.
right? Where many of us might see a failure and instantly think, I'm not good enough, or this just isn't for me. Champions see it more as information, as
Right.
data. It's the process giving them feedback, saying, okay, that way didn't work. Let's figure out why and try something else.
That's huge.
Hmm.
Shifting from like an emotional gut reaction to a more objective analysis.
Totally.
It takes something that feels like a personal attack and turns it into like an opportunity to learn and adapt your strategy. The questions become, what went wrong? What can I take from this to inform my next move?
And by going through this process over and over again, encountering those setbacks and analyzing them constructively, that's how you build this amazing resilience you see in top performers. It's like they develop an immunity to getting discouraged. Each time they face a challenge and learn from it, they come out stronger, better equipped for the next one.
Like a muscle that gets stronger because you're lifting weights. Every setback, if you deal with it effectively, it strengthens your ability to keep going.
Yeah, it's not about avoiding the struggle. It's about growing through it. And here's where things get really interesting. Failure can actually be a huge driver of innovation. When your initial plans fall apart, you're forced to explore new territory, right?
Yeah.
You have to come up with totally new approaches that you might never have considered if everything had gone smoothly in the first place.
Exactly.
Hmm.
When the usual ways are blocked off, you have to create new paths. And often that leads to unexpected discoveries and creative solutions that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Failure can be like a catalyst for big breakthroughs.
You see this everywhere in so many different fields. Take Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Most people consider him one of the best basketball players of all time, but guess what?
What?
He didn't even make his high school varsity team at first.
Wow.
That could have been devastating. It could have been the end of his basketball dreams.
Yeah.
But he didn't see it that way. Instead of giving up, he used it as fuel to get better, to prove everyone wrong.
That's amazing.
That setback, in a way, ignited this legendary drive in him.
That's a great example of how a rejection, which could feel like the end, can actually be this incredible motivator. It wasn't the final word on his ability. It was a turning point that just made him more determined.
Totally. Or how about J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter books? Before becoming this global phenomenon, her manuscript got rejected by a bunch of publishers.
Really?
Imagine facing that wall of no over and over.
Yeah.
But those rejections, those perceived failures, didn't make her give up on her vision. She kept going, and her persistence paid off big time.
And it wasn't just persistence,
Mhm.
right? Each rejection probably had some feedback, even if it wasn't direct, that could have helped her make the book even better.
For sure. And the fact that she kept putting her work out there shows that she refused to be defined by those initial setbacks.
Yeah.
And then there's someone like Elon Musk. in the early days of SpaceX, they had some very public rocket launch failures. And I'm not talking about little glitches, we're talking
Oh,
explosions.
wow.
For a lot of people, those kinds of high stakes failures would be completely demoralizing. But each time, they meticulously studied what went wrong, learned from the wreckage, and improved their designs.
Wow.
Those early failures were absolutely crucial to their success in changing how we think about space travel.
I think what's so remarkable about his story is that he saw those huge, very public failures not as proof that he wasn't good enough, but as incredibly valuable, even though expensive learning experiences. They were essential for progress.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this champion's mindset actually uses failure as a tool. And that leads us to this idea of failing faster. Now, to be clear, we're not saying you should be careless or intentionally mess things up. So what does failing faster actually mean?
Failing faster isn't about trying to make mistakes. It's more about taking a proactive approach where you experiment and iterate quickly. In pretty much any endeavor, you're working with assumptions. The fastest way to figure out which assumptions are right and which are wrong is to put your ideas into action, to test them in the real world, even if that means encountering setbacks along the way.
So it's about prioritizing the speed of learning.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for everything to be perfect before you do anything, you get something out there, try it, and learn from the imperfections.
Exactly. It's like shortening the feedback loop. The faster you experience those moments where things don't go as planned, and importantly, the better you are at extracting lessons from them, the faster you can refine your approach and get closer to your goal. Each attempt, even if it's not a complete success, gives you valuable data to inform your next step. Basically, failing faster is about valuing how fast you learn over making things perfect right away.
That makes sense. So in the startup world, that might look like launching a minimum viable product or MVP. It's basically a really basic version of your idea with just the core features.
Right.
And you put it out there to get feedback from users right away, even if it has obvious flaws.
Yeah.
Those initial failures, like features that people don't like or marketing that misses the mark, they're actually super valuable signals from the market.
It's all about testing those core ideas quickly and often. Instead of spending years perfecting every detail before anyone sees it, you put a basic version in front of users and see what they respond to. And then you adjust and refine based on what you learn.
It's like those early stumbles aren't failures, they're market research. And in
Exactly.
sports, you see this with athletes constantly practicing new techniques, trying out different strategies in training. Every missed shot, every awkward movement, every strategy that doesn't work gives them immediate feedback to adjust and get better.
Yeah,
It's like this constant cycle of small, fast failures in a safe environment that leads to better performance when it matters.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this idea applies just as powerfully to personal development. If you're learning something new, like how to play an instrument, you're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You'll struggle with some chords, but each of those failures tells you what you need to practice. Someone who's afraid to make mistakes, who waits until they feel ready to play perfectly, they'll probably learn much slower than someone who just jumps in, accepts the mistakes, and learns from them.
Okay, so we're starting to understand why champions embrace failure and the power of this fail faster idea. But for someone listening who still feels that disappointment or discouragement when things go wrong, what are some concrete steps they can take to shift their own relationship with failure?
That's the important part, right?
Hmm.
Understanding it is one thing, but actually putting it into practice is another. One of the biggest changes you can make is to consciously reframe how you think about failure.
Okay.
Instead of seeing it as a judgment on you or your worth, try to view it more objectively, as an outcome with valuable lessons. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this specific experience?
So it's about choosing to look for the positive, even when it feels tough. You're actively searching for the knowledge hidden within the setback.
Exactly. It takes effort to change how you talk to yourself.
Mm.
Instead of saying, I messed up again, try saying, okay, that didn't work. Let me figure out what happened and how I could adjust for next time.
And another important idea seems to be taking smart risks or calculated risks. This isn't about being reckless, but about stepping outside your comfort zone in a thoughtful, strategic way.
Yeah,
You're not just hoping for the best, you're making informed decisions to try new things, knowing that it might not work perfectly the first time.
right. Growth almost always happens when we push past what feels comfortable. When we take calculated risks, we face new challenges and experiences. And those inevitably come with some stumbles, but those are often the moments when we learn and develop the most.
And when a failure does happen, because it's a natural part of the process, it's crucial to take the time to analyze it honestly and objectively. It's not about dwelling on negative feelings or blaming anyone, but about breaking down what happened, figuring out the factors involved, and coming away with clear, actionable insights.
This is where failing faster becomes really powerful. The failure itself is just one piece. The real value comes from analyzing it and then adapting. What assumptions did you make? Which ones were wrong? How can you adjust your strategy, your methods, your thinking based on this new understanding? It's about treating each failure as a data point in a bigger experiment.
Like doing a science experiment. A failed experiment isn't a dead end. It's information that helps you refine your hypothesis and design a better experiment next time.
Exactly. And it's also super important to acknowledge and celebrate even the small wins along the way. The journey to achieving something great is rarely smooth or straightforward. Recognizing and appreciating those moments of progress, no matter how small, helps keep you motivated and focused on growth. It prevents you from getting too discouraged by the inevitable setbacks.
Because it's easy to fixate on the failures and forget how far you've come.
Totally.
Celebrating those small wins gives you this positive reinforcement and keeps you moving in the right direction.
It helps build momentum and a sense of optimism even when you're facing challenges.
Okay, so we're learning to embrace failure, to fail faster, and to extract valuable lessons from those experiences. But it seems like there's something else, another key ingredient here. You can't just fail over and over and expect success to magically appear. What else is essential in this formula?
You're absolutely right. Embracing failure and learning from it are critical, but they're only part of it. The other indispensable ingredients are persistence and patience. Even with the most effective fail-faster approach, achieving something significant often requires sustained effort and unwavering commitment, even when you face repeated setbacks. Champions don't just learn from failure, they also have this incredible ability to persevere.
So that resilience we talked about isn't just about bouncing back quickly. It's about having that long-term tenacity, that refusal to be stopped by temporary defeats.
Exactly. Going after any worthwhile goal is rarely a sprint. It's almost always a marathon. And any marathon will have its tough parts, its moments where you feel like you're hitting a wall and getting nowhere. That's when persistence is essential. You have to keep putting in the work, even when the rewards aren't obvious right away.
And patience, as I understand it, is about having a realistic sense of time, allowing yourself the time to learn from those failures, to make adjustments, and to see the results of those small improvements over time. It's about resisting the urge to give up just because you haven't achieved overnight success.
Exactly. Failure can sometimes feel like a detour, a delay on your journey. But it's more accurate to see it as a part of the journey itself. Patience lets you trust the process, to understand that setbacks aren't necessarily signs to abandon your goal, but opportunities to learn, adapt, and ultimately find a better way forward.
There's this great quote that comes to mind: success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. It emphasizes that it's not about avoiding failure entirely, which is probably impossible anyway, but about the spirit to get back up after each fall and keep striving.
It perfectly captures the importance of perseverance. It's that willingness to get back up, learn from what happened, and try again with new knowledge and renewed determination.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the fail faster formula, it's clear that embracing failure isn't about seeking out mistakes, but about developing a powerful mindset, a champion's mindset that sees setbacks as valuable lessons, as stepping stones on the path to growth. It's about accelerating your learning by experimenting, carefully analyzing those missteps, and then fueling that learning with unwavering persistence and the patience to see the bigger picture.
It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with failure, recognizing that the path to success is rarely straight, and that those moments where things don't go as planned are not obstacles to be feared, but opportunities to learn, adapt, and ultimately become stronger and more effective.
So, for everyone listening, think about a challenge you're facing, a goal you're working towards. Are you ready to shift your perspective? Are you willing to see those inevitable stumbles not as the end, but as potential springboards for faster progress and ultimately the success you're after?
Think about a recent setback you've experienced. Instead of focusing on the negative feelings, try to objectively identify the key takeaways. What did you learn about yourself, about your approach, about the situation? How can you use that new knowledge to inform your next steps?
And here's a final thought to ponder. Could it be that the fear of failure itself is the biggest thing holding us back from our goals? And by understanding and changing our relationship with failure, might we unlock a huge amount of potential that we haven't even tapped into yet? It's something to think about.
Definitely. Something to think about.
Thanks for listening.